Do you feel really tall?
I do. I don't like being in the middle.
The tallest one in the group now.
No.
Oh, that's recording. All right, welcome to Body Smart Book Club. This week we're going to be starting our dive into Primal Endurance by Mark Sisson. Not that you need to know his name, but it's a fun book. So,
well, I need to know his name to look it up.
That's true.
So you can go get the book and read it with us.
Need to know that.
Yes.
All right, and today we've got Preston with us. So he's going to be joining us while we go through this book. And so just tell us a little bit about yourself, Preston.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be a part of this VODCAST and be able to talk about Primal Endurance. Kind of a little bit of background about me. I grew up in Kaysville, Utah. Went to Davis High School. Was on their track and cross country team, and then got a scholarship to run for Weber State. Ran there for 5 years and graduated with a degree in exercise science, and now run professionally for Solomon. So running has always been a big part of my life and something that I focus on both in training and outside of training. It's really something I live as opposed to something I do. Hopefully I can bring a little bit of my experience into your guys' knowledge through your schooling and your experiences to be just a little bit of extra addition there.
For sure. We're definitely excited to have you. Preston's going to be a great resource in bringing the science and the practice of running together. So I think it'll be great. So let's dive in. Take the deep dive. So one of the really big themes of this book, and something that we all I think agree is really important in training, is learning to balance both stress and rest, and how to make that effective throughout a training plan, by the day, by the week, by the month, by the year. You know, what seems to happen a lot though is that there's kind of this unrealistic approach, right? It's like, okay, here's my goal. I'm going to run a 5K. I'm going to run a marathon. I'm going to do a 50K, whatever the goal is. And I think we end up killing ourselves because we've just always got to beat our best. It's, let's do this, and the rest gets downplayed and the stress gets upplayed. And is that a word, upplayed? I don't know. I made it. It's okay. Shakespeare invented words. I can do it too. And so that really gets out of whack. And I think that ends up having some really negative consequences. Primarily an injury risk. But I think just in general levels of fatigue and things like that. So kind of what's been your experience with that, Preston?
Yeah, you got to remember, with training, that training isn't linear. It's not a constant progression from being where you start up to your goal. There's always going to be mountains and valleys between there and where you want to be based on, injuries or races or recovery days, things like that. It's not always the push every single day. And I think in the media that gets over glorified because no one's going to be bragging about, the 4 days they took off to rest to make sure they were healed correctly. They're going to be talking about those hard workouts. And so sometimes that gets kind of lost within the training. And so I've noticed, when you're getting proper recovery, you're going to be making the most gains. You got to remember that when you're recovering, that's when you're getting stronger.
I love that. And I think that's super important, right? Like the exercise, hitting it hard, doing those things is really important, but our bodies have to have time to rest, to rebuild, to recovery, right? That's why they're called recovery days. And we're not planning that into our schedule. We really do ourselves a disservice. So I think that's a super important point. It was funny as you're talking about like what we hear in the media, just Chariots of Fire started playing in my head, right? But I think that like that happens to a lot of us, right? It's like, I got to get that, right? Like the crowds will be cheering, rah, and that song plays in your head, and you cross the finish line, and you just killed it, and you're amazing, right? And then that seeps its way into each workout, right? Oh, I've got a Chariots of Fire this like 5-mile run. I want those crowds cheering in my head. And then I think also, right, when we're training with groups, that can be difficult too as well, right?
You want to show everyone up in the group.
Exactly, right? Like I want that glory of the run. I want that glory of the workout. Mm-hmm. And so this is definitely a point that got mentioned, but something important to talk about, I think, is being able to check our egos at the door on training and on a race day, and just try to perform in a way that ends up being healthy for our minds and our bodies, and helps us approach those things the right way, so that training is not only fun and we can have those performance days, right? We get our PR on race days, but that we live a really balanced life and we have rest. And I think a big part of that is just getting out of our own way and putting pride out of the way.
Yeah, for sure. Your ego a lot of the times is the downfall of training, and I've seen that a lot within my own training and within my experiences. A good example of that is when I was competing in college. You come onto the team, or really this can be related to anyone joining any training group or any running group. You almost feel like you have something to prove when you first start, knowing that these people don't know who you are, but in your mind, you're like, oh, I'm this great athlete. I can do this and this and this. And you want to make sure everyone else knows that too. So every workout in your mind becomes, oh, I can push harder on this distance run. I can run faster intervals. When in reality, you're just digging yourself into a deeper hole every single time, just for the sake of trying to prove to someone else that you're a good athlete. And that doesn't accomplish either of those goals, really. So.
For sure. Yeah, I think that gets in the way. And I think another thing that gets in the way of us slowing down and just pushing it too hard is that endorphin high, right? That's for me, that's been hard because I didn't realize it, but I became obsessed with the endorphin high. Like, if you ask me what my perfect day would be climbing a mountain and pushing it super hard and burning 5,000 calories and just killing myself, and then coming home and eating a giant burrito. And I was like, and I thought, like, that's healthy. And it's okay. And it's okay to eat the burrito because I burned 5,000 calories. But really, I'm just like soaking in the endorphin high of the run, and I'm soaking in, dopamine from the sugar and carbs. And I was just loving that. And I realized that that's not a healthy way to live. And I think a lot of us need to realize that we, like, pushing it that hard and getting that endorphin high every single time is not good for your body.
Definitely. So, and I think it's funny, right? Because we think of endorphins, right, as this like amazing feel-good chemical, and it totally is, but it's our body's response to, like, I'm not going to feel in pain, right? Like, let's release these, right? They're endogenous opiates.
Yeah, he said it's like we have these processes for when a lion is about to kill us and we need to run for our lives, and our bodies don't know the difference between we're running a race and a lion is trying to kill us.
Definitely.
So we don't want to mess with those hormonal.
Yeah. I think just constantly chasing that high, right? Chasing that rush of endorphins. I don't think it's bad from time to time, for sure, right? Like, we all want that, right? King of the mountain mentality.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, I think it starts to wreak havoc on our systems when we do that long term. And I think another important point to speak to is, like, let's definitely, like, running definitely does have its benefits, right? Any form of exercise has proven benefits for its effects on mood, on energy levels, and things like effects on anxiety and depression, right? Positive effects on those. So it's really good. But I think to recognize that while exercise does really good things for our body, right? Running through those training programs does good things for our body, and it drives adaptations. Exercise is also another form of stress. And like you said, whether we're running through the lion, running through the lion, so fast, like the Flash, running from a lion, or like running to chase a cheeseburger. I don't know, that was a bad one, right? Or whatever the stress is, right? Our body is still responding to stress in the same way, and so really making sure that we're getting those periods of rest, making sure that we're getting enough sleep. Sleep, rest, all those things are huge in preparing our bodies to fight another day, to do that next workout. We're not constantly running ourselves into the ground and then going out again, hitting it so hard that our bodies don't have time to adapt. They don't have time to heal from the stresses that we put them through.
I guess one of the points that he makes in the book that really speaks to that is when he talks about that transition from going from your aerobic work up to your hard, intense work. He lists like several different checklist items that you have to be able to hit before he wants you transitioning. And some of those, include having at least 8 weeks of aerobic work.
We're laughing because we hate this.
And being to a point where, your sleep schedule is very consistent and you're eating a consistent diet and there's no aches or pains. And so basically just making sure that, your body's 100% recovered before you start amping up the work to become more intense.
Definitely.
Right. And I really like that. Another thing that I want to touch on real quick is it's important to take care of our physical bodies, right? But we also need to think about our mental and emotional health. We need to make sure that we're taking time to not think about exercising and training, and we're taking time to spend time with our family and our friends and do things that we enjoy and get away from that training mindset all the time. I know, sorry. I want to throw that in there before we jumped into.
No, I love that because
that's,
that's something that he actually says when he talks about like at the end of a training season and you start taking time completely off. He doesn't just say time off from exercise. He says time off from working out, time off from thinking about working out, and basically just leaving the sport completely aside, as opposed to just taking time off from actually running.
I actually wrote down a quote that I loved. Okay, here it is. So he says, "Don't be one of those endurance athletes with blinders on, running away from a balanced lifestyle, from little faces calling out for more quality time, from gentle, well-intended reminders from a partner or other loved ones to slow down, reflect, and regain some balance and perspective." I just like that a lot, because when you are training a lot, it does take away a lot of time from friends and family and other things that you like to do. And I have seen people who they just get obsessed with running and they don't spend as much time with their families maybe they should. I've been talking to Dave Earnshaw. We met online through that Facebook page, Run for Fun. And he has mentioned that he doesn't take away any time from his family to run. It's a big passion of his. He loves it. What he has sacrificed is sleep. And I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I personally agree with that, but he said that he, instead of getting rid of running or getting rid of his family, he has given up 2 hours of sleep every night so he can do his run in the morning, but he's always home to be with his family every single night, and he's not allowed to complain that he's tired or hurting or aching. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
He still is making time for his family. So
I like that. No, I mean, I think that's super important, right? Balance in all things. And I think it'd be interesting to hear your take on that, Preston, right? Like, because you've had like, as an elite level athlete, right? You've been in that, been in the zone, as it were, for years, right? And from high school to college to running for Solomon, like that is an intense schedule, and it requires a lot, and it requires a lot of dedication. And so, I guess maybe tell me about how you've handled it during those different periods of times, and what you found works and what doesn't work as well.
Yeah, and I do come from a unique situation where, it is part of my career as opposed to having a full-time gig on the side as well, like many, most runners do, I guess. They're trying to fit it around their work and their family life. And with my training, I'm typically running 120, 130 miles a week, with lifting every day as well. And so, that adds up time-wise. I'm probably working out 4.5 hours a day. And so trying to balance that with everyday life can be difficult, because it's not just 4 hours of working out. You also got your time where you're resting, where you're doing recovery, where you're at physical therapy, things like that add up onto it. And I find that making a checklist of things you have to get done that day, and just making sure that you schedule things in a way that allows you to complete all of those things. So I know that right when I wake up, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my first workout of the day done. I work out twice a day to help break that up a little bit. And getting that done right away, takes away a lot of the burden of knowing that, okay, I've got, 18 miles to get done today. That's a ton of work. And so, typically in the morning, I'll do like 12 or 13 miles, and knowing that I have the bulk of it out of the way really just refreshes my mind and allows me to then step back and be able to look, okay, like what relationships do I need to nurture? What parts of my career need a little bit of attention? Things like that sometimes can get lost if, you are constantly focusing on your workouts and what you're going to do tomorrow and your upcoming race and the nagging injury you have. It all just kind of adds up. So just kind of getting that out of the way and moving on after that, and just moving on to the next part of your life is the best way I've found to be able to to balance your life.
Yeah, I really like
That's
that.
awesome.
That's cool. That it's kind of like that, like the big rock principle, right? You take a container, and if you fill it with sand and pebbles, and then you try to fit all the big rocks in, it won't fit in. But you do the opposite, right? You put those big rocks in, right? Like these are the things that need to get done every day. These are my base, right? Whether it be getting those workouts in, like I need to spend time with my family. I need to devote this much time, and that you get those big important items in, and then like everything falls in and around that. And I think at the same time, right? Like the things that are really important fall in and fill that space, and the things that are unimportant in our lives end up falling out of that space, and helping to create a better balance. So I love that approach. I think that's really awesome.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
A bunch of things that we were discussing before kind of fell under his discussion on periodization.
And I don't want this to become like we're just ripping this book apart.
Yeah, right.
We do have contrasting opinions, and we're going to hit both sides. We're going to hit kind of what he likes and then what we think about it as well. Some of that'll match up, and some of it will be, from our experiences, a little bit different than what he says.
Definitely. But we won't do any name calling, so that'll be good. So you mentioned this earlier, and we kind of like all made faces. This idea, right, of that just strictly 8-week period, only cardio, right? We're not introducing any other workout, or not just cardio, just all in that aerobic zone, no other workouts. And that's a big thing that we struggled with.
First of all, Mark's physical therapist, I'm a PTA, we're all about strength training, right?
And for sure.
To just completely get rid of strength training for 8 weeks while you're running and putting that high repetitive impact on your body, that's horrible. I don't think you should just stop doing strength training.
Yeah, and I think for several reasons. One of which is it takes time, especially for novice athletes, right? When we're beginning a strength training program, it takes about 4 to 6 weeks for some of those beginning adaptations to occur, right? For the tendon to begin to change, for the bone to begin to change. And most of those changes in the first several weeks are actually neural changes, right? So kind of that mind-muscle connection. But as far as muscle hypertrophy, as far as tendon strength, as far as bone health, those are a little bit further out into the training program. And so to say like, hey, we're going to throw those away and then we'll build back into them. Well, it's already a huge portion of the training season that we're throwing that away for.
Yeah.
The other, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, he did say that like, he did say, get rid of the really high intensity, heavy lifting. He did mention though that it is okay to work on the like preventative, what is the word? It's okay to work on the like rehabilitation exercises, or if you're working on imbalances in your body. So he did throw that in there.
That's true. I actually, I sort of thought, I was like, all right, Mark, you.
Yeah, I
okay.
actually was getting really angry. I was like, no, this is wrong. But then he threw that in there, and I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really important, right? That preventive side of things. And so a lot of runners, I think a lot of runners just, unless they've been a big part of like track and field, probably even more so in collegiate sports, right? There's a lifting program that goes along with it. But I think a lot of people kind of a lot of runners eschew having a strength training program, right? Oh, I'm going to add too much mass, like it's going to get in the way, like it's going to affect my aerobic base. And if they do exercise, do you like that positive thing? It's often body weight, which isn't bad, right? Like any type of strength training is going to be awesome, and we want to add that in. And body weight training is going to be really effective from a strength, like improving strength perspective. But again, when we're looking at bone and tendon, and trying to prep those for the type of loads that get put on them repetitively through running, that's just not enough. We need that high load, heavier weights to build that bone strength, to build tendon health. And hopefully that translates into fewer bone stress injuries, fewer tendinous injuries, which make up a big portion of running related injuries. And so there's the PT biomechanist out of Montana, University of Montana, I think. Hopefully I didn't get that wrong. Rich Willie. I like a lot of his stuff. You follow him on Instagram at Montana Running Lab. But I was listening to a podcast recently with him, and he was mentioning that, you want to have like the build and the training of a runner, but the bones of a basketball player, right? Most basketball players, right? They're doing that heavy lifting. They're doing even like the high impact activities and plyo, building their power, having that impact force, which is important for bone development and bone strength. And so I thought that was kind of a cool little soundbite.
I love that.
Yeah.
Honestly, why don't runners like lift more? Because it is such a huge thing in sports. The basketball players and the football players, they're all in the gym. Why don't we have that same mentality?
Yeah.
It's very neglected. And, talking from a performance standpoint with lifting and lifting heavy in particular, you're working different energy systems. When you're working, your light lifts with lots of reps, lots of sets, you're going to be working that aerobic system that you're already working the bulk amount of your training anyway with your running. And so when you're racing any distance, there's always a ratio between each energy system you're using. You're never using one exclusively, and you're always using a little bit of each one. And so by neglecting working those different energy systems, you're essentially hurting your performance, because even in a marathon, it's still 1% anaerobic. And so if you're not working those high intensity, heavy lifts, you're not utilizing that benefit you could potentially have. It essentially is just raising your ceiling to be able to be a faster runner and a more efficient runner, as opposed to not doing the heavy lifting and just doing the lighter stuff.
Yeah.
And so with his approach of having 8 weeks of, just the preventative lifting, the light stuff, the injury prevention, and then 4 weeks of really intense stuff. And you mentioned that the adaptations don't take place until about 6 weeks. There's not really enough time for your body to utilize those adaptations to be able to become stronger and faster like we want to see with that heavy lifting.
Yeah. I really liked what you said. I want to repeat that. Right. So not only more efficient, but faster and better performing. And so I think that's a really important point to hit, right? We do build that aerobic base, right? We want that to power us, and we want to use our fat stores for energy to keep us propelled and keep us going through races. Mm-hmm. But definitely, right, we've got to include those other components to increase our speed and just affecting overall performance. Yeah. So awesome points.
Awesome. Do you want to talk about the black and white approach?
Oh yeah, maybe bring that in, right? So yeah, do you want to say
I guess that kind of was what that was, huh?
That's true.
It was kind of just very brief, though, mainly with the lifting part, addressing maybe the running portion of it as well, where, it's all aerobic, and then all of a sudden he wants you doing this really fast stuff, and you're kind of missing that in-between work, that threshold, marathon pace type running, as opposed to just going straight to, 400-meter repeats at mile race pace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, and that's so interesting, right? Because kind of the theme of the book was this just go with the flow and don't be too concrete about anything.
Body, but you have to do it this way.
Yeah. Walk like this. No, you cannot move outside of this zone, or else Mark Sisson will show up at your door, take away the keys to your car. No, sit down. So no, that was a really interesting thing for us. Kind of jarring when you're reading the rest of the book, that he wanted it to be very black and white. These phases have to be like this and they have to be like that, because I think that is important, right? Just kind of easing into things and adding them in so that your body is able to have that time to adapt and build throughout a training season.
And it just seems, I don't know, it just seems weird to all of a sudden be running super high mileage, and then he says to do high intensity things and decrease your volume dramatically. That just seems weird to me. And then also he said during your high intensity phase, that's also your competition phase. Do you really want to be doing high intensity work and lifting heavy the same week as a competition? That doesn't make sense.
Right.
In contrast to kind of what he teaches, a typical periodization schedule kind of rolls as, first you have your base building phase, and then you have your transition phase where it's going to be that threshold type work that's longer, faster stuff, I would say at race pace. And then the next phase being a diminished volume, but then it's going to be faster than race pace stuff on your hard days, followed by kind of a taper phase. And so speaking to your point, it's kind of missing that transition phase and the taper phase right before your race. It kind of just hits those two main, really fast and hard and aerobic. And I think those other phases to kind of gradually work you into what you're doing are important, both for injury prevention and for, working all the different muscular systems and aerobic systems to be able to reach your peak.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like what we were saying earlier, we feel like his approach is slightly unrealistic. So he says to go, 4 weeks at high intensity and then to take an equal amount of time in a rest period / another aerobic build period. And for athletes who are competing all the time, maybe they have a race every other weekend or every, couple of months, that just doesn't really fit in there.
Yeah, definitely. And two, I think, and this is something that we've talked about in some previous videos from the last book, is as important as like building that aerobic base is like having those physiological changes happen. There's also a huge mental component, right? And being able to deal with the mental fatigue and the mental challenge of a variety of different workouts, of a variety of different lengths. I don't think that just those long, low intensity runs can prepare you for that mental challenge of like running, for a longer time at that high intensity, or just some of the different things that you encounter, or man, I just like, boy, this is the end of this course and we've got like a huge hill at the end, right? Like, I think you just need to introduce all those different types of training and obviously we want to keep that idea of periodization and following those periods to get the most benefit, but also like, obviously you run a ton, ton of miles each week. You're training for an ultra marathon. And so like, I think that mental component is huge for both of you. Like, speak to that.
Yeah, with my training in particular, running twice a day really comes down to a lot of time. And that's the biggest mental thing for me, thinking about it the night before. I'm like, okay, like I've got X amount of hours that I have to be training tomorrow. Like, how do I perceive that in my mind? And so on days where I'm cross training or I'm taking a day off, I try to stay in this routine of having the exact same amount of time set aside so that I'm mentally used to being able to take out that much time. For instance, like with a taper week, I'm not going to be running twice a day. I'm going to be lowering the mileage. But instead of doing that taper in the evening, I try to keep that time still set aside. And instead of using it as a workout, I use it as time to, take an ice bath or to stretch or do something that's going to help with the recovery process. So that mentally, when I transition back into working out, it's not going to feel foreign to me. And I'm going to be used to that time commitment that it takes.
That's really smart. I like that a lot. For me and my husband training for 100, I feel like a 100-mile race is basically how mentally tough are you? It's not even really like, is your body ready for it? Because your body's never ready for a 100-mile race. So what's important for us is our long runs, and everyone knows the long run's important, but that's when we really exercise our mental toughness. Is okay, we've been running for 4 hours, we still have 2 more hours to run, we're tired or hot or sweaty, and you just got to push through. And I think in those moments of it's really hard, but you just push through, that's where you get that mental toughness, and you have to exercise that just like you exercise your body.
Yeah. And I want to draw a contrast between developing that mental toughness and kind of suffering for the sake of suffering.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Thank you. I love this point.
Because there is a huge difference, right? And it's all about what's the motivation behind like that pushing through, right? It's like, okay, this is part of my training, and like I need to be able to do this to be able to like make it through that race, to be able to perform, versus like, oh my gosh, like I gotta feel like I killed it, like I should be totally dead, and like the next day everything should hurt like so bad, so I know that I got a good workout, right? That suffering just for the sake of suffering, because right, it's that badge of honor that I wear.
Because it's manly.
Yeah. And I think that's probably a challenge from novice athletes and even in the elite realm of like, right. And I'm sure it goes somewhat back to the ego point that we talked about earlier, but
totally.
Definitely.
Yeah.
One of the examples that it gives of an athlete in the book is Nick Willis. And he's someone that I know personally. You know, I've seen him in the track world. He's been a big name in the sport for many years. He's 37 now. So, you know, he's been competing now for probably just under 20 years on the world stage, which is a super long career for a distance runner to be that competitive. I mean, he was a medalist at the world stage in the last 2-3 years. So to be that age and be able to do that really speaks to his ability to take his easy days easy. And it kind of gives a snippet of his training plan in there. And it really stood out to me how slow his easy days were. Yeah. I mean, we're talking a guy that this year he's tied for the most consecutive years of running a sub 4 mile. And so he's been on top of his game for a really long time. He was doing 10 to 12 miles in 2 hours. And now to some people, you know, that might still seem fast, but we're talking about one of the best distance runners in the world. And he's running 10-minute pace for his easy days, which by his standards is very slow. And so that discipline and that mental strength required to be able to do that was very eye-opening to me.
Yeah. So that's cool, awesome. Right? That mental strength to do, but also to not do, right? Like I think that takes a lot of self-control and a lot of dedication to your sport. So no, I think that's a great point you brought up. I love that. Awesome. I think that's all the big stuff. I think we hit all the points that we wanted to hit. We did a fair amount of beaten Mark up a little bit, but again, some really good and important points, especially in relating to having appropriate rest, as well as designing our training in such a way that treats our body right.
And we got to give him credit because look at this man's bod. He's like 65 years old or something.
He's looking good.
He is. I wanted to see like, hey, what does he actually look like? So I looked up a picture of him just on Google, and it was like weird because it looked like the face of like a little bit older guy just pasted onto this bodybuilder, and I was like, what? I'm like, if I can be like that at your age, like I'm doing something right.
He's doing something right.
Yeah, he's definitely doing something right? So yeah, definitely a shout out to him. And some really good concepts in this book, and just think really sparked some good discussion, which is always important.
Yeah.
So again, it was awesome to have Preston here with us today. He's going to be joining us throughout this book as we dive a little deeper and learn together. So yeah,
excited to be here. It's gonna be fun.
Woohoo!
For sure.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us, and catch us for our next episode of the Body Smart Book Club.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right.